Hello, good evening and welcome everyone tonight who's in the room and everyone who's watching online to today's meeting of the Regeneration, Culture and Environment Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Firstly, can I check if there are any apologies for absence at all? Councillor Filmer.
Lomez is running late. He's substituting for him.
Any other substitutions? Councillor Mandarakis.
Councillor Amanishan can't make tonight, so I am subbing for her.
Thank you. And I believe Councillor Fern and Councillor Etheridge have also sent apologies. And Councillor Hine, just in time, and Councillor Brake. Apologies. Okay. On to the next agenda item. Can I sign the record of the meeting held on the 10th of October 2024 as correct? Thank you very much. Okay. Urgent matters, there are none. Can I ask if there are any declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests or other significant interest tonight? Okay, well, thank you very much. We'll now move on to the substantive business of the meeting. The first item will be the annual scrutiny of the Community Safety Partnership, including an update on the Community Safety Plan 2024 to 2027. We'll have about 45 minutes to discuss this. So, Councillor Patterson, as Chair of the Community Safety Partnership, will you introduce this item and what members of the Community Safety Partnership that are in attendance?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's been my privilege since July to be Chair of Medway Community Safety Partnership, which is, as you can see tonight, a team effort. It's about working together with key partners. So that means Medway Council working with Kent Police, Kent Fire and Rescue, Probation Service, Integrated Care Board, and working on the goals which have been set out in the Community Safety Plan, which was also refreshed earlier this year, which is a 4-year a document which runs for 4 years, setting out our key priorities. So there's lots of detail in the report. I won't waste further time in picking any of that out, because I'm sure members have got their own priorities that they want to focus on. But we are all ears, and hope that between us we will have answers to your questions, and if not, we'll do our best to get them for you.
Thank you. Just for the benefit of everyone who's here and online, can we just introduce the panel here tonight for people's benefit? So, Chloe.
Is it best if everyone introduces themselves? Yeah.
Yep.
Good evening, I'm Chloe Brooke. I'm the Deputy Head of Service for North Kent Probation. That covers the Medway areas as well as the Dartford and Gravesend areas.
Good evening, I'm Steve Chevis. I'm Head of Public Health Programmes. One of the areas of responsibility of my team is substance misuse.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Gary Cook. I'm the District Commander for Policing in Medway.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Stephen Perez. I'm the Community Insights and Partnership Lead for Kent Fire and Rescue Service.
Thank you very much for those introductions, and thank you, Councillor Patterson, for introducing the report. Are there any members who would like to ask any questions on this matter? Councillor Filmer.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for the report, much appreciated. Just wondering what the SPG, the impact's been on reducing violence against women and girls, tackling antisocial behaviour, tackling drugs and alcohol and reducing reoffending. If you've a little bit on that, if you could.
Good evening. Thanks for the question. I suppose it's difficult to answer in a huge amount of detail, but if you take each subject area in itself, ASB is down on the year. There are still improvements that we need to make in ASB, depending on area, depending on wards. There's been some increases and some rises in some areas that we've looked at, particularly dangerous dogs have gone up this year. Perhaps you'd say that is not unexpected given the focus that's on it and some of the national issues that we've had there. But we have had, I think, a significant impact on ASB across Medway this year. Our neighbourhood policing model being the focus for that, and it's not going to change. We're going to have beat officers that are in each ward, that are visible, that are contactable, that will identify the problems and try and come up with solutions. Now, that's not always perfect. It relies on personality and people that are in those posts and work we've got to do, but I think that is a significant improvement, and nothing's going to change in that regard. My granddad was a beat officer. I know the value of that. I've lived through it, and knowing who your local officer is and what they can do for you is absolutely crucial. We can't be faceless. Despite the challenges, and previously we've suffered financial challenge and we've got challenges to come, but that model's not going to change. So I think we have seen improvements there. We do work in partnership across those key issues. There are areas to improve. My main focus moving forward, or a main focus should I say, is town centres. Really having that kind of visible frontline policing that's in there that can deal with the problems that are in town centres. So ASB, I think we're improving, more work to do. Violence against women and girls, again, I suppose I'm marking my own homework, but I think we have made improvements over this year. Our investigation teams are strong. Some of the results we get and the people we lock up, I could list ad infinitum, some of the excellent work that goes on. Again, the teams are developing their skills, they are getting better. We're working in schools with health, with all of our partners to make that difference in terms of being available to people, to have the right services at the right time to help people, but never forgetting we're the police. We're here to arrest people, we're here to put people in prison that need to be there and safeguard our victims, which we're doing. And I think the kind of data is testament to that, but the feeling of our officers, where they're focused on, where their skills are, is absolutely on the money in that regard. We've had recent events where we've been in town centres, like I say, publicising what we can do, how we can support people, and we'll continue to do that through the year. Vigilant as well, where we've got plainclothes officers deployed, looking for behaviours that are not right, where we can make a difference, where we can stop this happening, which is absolutely where we should be. And the last part of the question was it on drugs and tackling that in terms of enforcement? I'll defer to Steve over kind of health matters. But drugs are an issue in Medway. They definitely are. We can't deny that. We can't get away from it. It's a national issue. We can't police our way out of it. County lines are a particular issue. We've got a team that are deployed day in, day out looking at that, looking at the intelligence. I think in the report it details the amount of lines we've closed down. We'll continue to be as robust as possible, and there's all manner of ways that we tackle that. But again, we've got to do it in partnership with education, with health, because we've got young people that are at risk and they're vulnerable, and it's not a matter of just policing our way out of that. So it's my favourite word, a holistic approach. You can't just do it yourself. I think we're joined up. I think we're proactive. I think the report and the contents and some of the detail in there is testament to that. And I'm passionate about this work, and I won't stop doing it. I won't stop trying to deliver for the people that you represent, because that's what we're here to do, not just be a faceless service that turns up and puts people in prison. We've got to engage with our communities, understand their problems and deal with them.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thanks for the report. Firstly, I'd just like to say about our ward officers. Since we've had the ward officers, it's worked so well. I think before we had them, we struggled a bit on that side with the police, but since we've had Richard Jones and David Brett in on the peninsula, we've worked with them on several different things and it's really working well. So just, if you could pass that on to them for us, just to say it's really good. The other thing, on the consultation, the residents' sort of perspective of it is that everything's to do with drugs. And if you see our 4 things we're on the plan, violence against women and social behaviour, reduced offending, it all seems to be surrounded with, in drugs. Drugs seems to cause most of the problems here. So I think, as you say, working to solve that problem is going to be a big one. I just wondered about the county lines. You mentioned the county lines. I know they've closed down a lot, but they seem to open up quite quickly, didn't they, and sort of thing. So how's that progressing with that, to try and stop the supply into Medway? Thank you.
So I probably can provide a more detailed written update, but in terms of how it happens, there's a whole industry in policing that comes behind it. So we have central intelligence, we have local intelligence that builds up that picture. We've got people that are looking at phone lines that are in place that our users are using, that we do a lot of technical work, which I won't go into here, to identify who those people are and what they're doing. And we try and not only deal with the people that are dealing the drugs on the street, that are often vulnerable young people, that policing our way out of it, enforcement is sometimes not the only way, but we will take that option if we do. But we've got both our local team and our Serious Crime Directorate working with the Met Police upstream to try and take those people out. And the work that they manage to do and their results are pretty phenomenal, but there is always more to do, and there is a societal angle to all of this, in that we'll keep doing our job. We won't say it's too difficult, we won't stop doing it, but there are wider sort of teamwork and partnership angles that we need to keep exploring.
Yeah, thanks for that. As you say, the drug use on the ground, there's a lot of vulnerable people and that sort of thing, so you've got to catch them further up the line, you're saying, a bit near the big boys and that sort of thing.
Yeah, we need to catch them further up the line. We can't let people get away with it and break those supply chains, both by taking drugs off the streets, but also taking their money and their liberty away further up, the people that are controlling it. We've also got a lot of work that goes on with drug users. We've got a vulnerability panel that is health, police, partners, housing, that's trying to take the market away, as it were, trying to divert people away from drug use, to take the market away so that we can take the need for it away. So it's a complex kind of phenomenon, but the policing job is to take drug dealers off the streets. Your residents want that, you represent them, you're going to demand that of us, and we're not going to stop doing it over the year, but we also need to look at the partnership work and the health angle to it 100%.
Yeah, thanks for that. I say it's about, not only about arresting people, it's about education, isn't it, and trying to educate the people on the ground. Right, thanks very much for that, I appreciate that, thank you.
Thank you. Next, sorry, apologies.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to come in and address that, the health aspects of it. Since the Harm to Hope drug strategy, it puts an emphasis on breaking supply chains, increasing the amount of people who are in treatment, so driving up the quality and the quantity of treatment that's going on, preventing people from taking up substances in the first place, and then doing that through a collaborative approach. And it's great to kind of hear Gary talking about the collaborative approach, because we really are doing that. We've recently recommissioned the service, and Forward Trust are now providing drug treatment. We identify that treatment is a protective factor for people. It does mean that somebody who may be going out trying to acquire drugs, using crime to generate the money to get those drugs, is then being supported through a treatment service. Also very pleased to talk about the work we're doing with probation to ensure there's continuity of care from prisons into community treatment services so that it's one continuous treatment journey for people rather than a treatment journey that has various cliff edges that people can fall through. So we are seeing more people in treatment. We are seeing a very active provider who are then also developing recovery work within that model as well. So it's not only stopping people or enabling people to stop using substances, but empowering them to remain off substances in the future.
Yeah, thanks for that. Obviously, it's a team game, as you say. The other one little worrying thing on the report, the number of deaths as well from drugs seem to have risen, which is a bit worrying. I don't know if I was in the paper the other day, they're selling this pink drugs and it's filled up with a load of old crap, but that's a bit worrying where there's been the death rise, has gone up.
Thank you. Councillor Mandarakis.
Just wondered, around the prevent education officers of the PEO, just wondered how we ensure that academies engage with that, and if at that meeting there's a representative of every school, because it just seems like it would be a huge meeting.
Yeah, you're correct. It will be an absolutely huge meeting with every representation from education there. Our current main link through education is through safeguarding at the moment. We acknowledge that the kind of whole prevention aspect is one that needs some additional work doing to it. We have robust policing, we have robust treatment services. The education and prevention is something that we still need to do, and I think we need to do that in a reasoned way. So one of our projects that we're just doing is looking at the reasons why young people use substances in the first place. So rather than just trying things and just hoping that young people won't use them, but looking at the model as to what are the drivers, what are the influences, what are young people's views to the laws around drugs and their kind of attitudes and behaviours to them, so that we can then try and address them right from the word go. As that work then develops, we've just done the initial part of it, as that work develops, it will then turn into working groups as to, so what do we do with this? How do we then apply these lessons that we learned? How do we then design things that will actually enable young people to make informed choices and safe choices?
Just to say, I remember the DARE days. I don't remember what it stands for, but the ruler with the DARE, the Drugs Awareness Courses.
Thank you. Councillor Cook.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for this report. I think there's always that kind of litmus test of, as I read it, do I feel more nervous for my children? And I felt safer even, so thank you, because it was very encouraging. And also thank you, just to echo what Councillor Williams has said, I'm sure I speak for Councillor Peake and myself, PC Matt Amos is our link police officer. He's been absolutely phenomenal in our ward work. Really, really appreciate his work. I'm really grateful for mention of things like the PSPOs, the specific mention of the fire prevention work that's happened on Barnfield. Thank you very, very much for that. My questions were quite specific around, there were 2 times in the reports where we're waiting for further information. One was on the Police Crime Commissioner commissioning plan in the report, and the other was on the violence reduction units. And I just wondered how much waiting for that kind of information affects the work that we're doing, when we think we might hear, how that might change what we do. Thank you, Chair.
So I think in general terms, obviously there are implications from the budget which we had recently at national level, and how that trickles down via the Police and Crime Commissioner in various different grants. So yeah, I mean, I agree. It's not ideal, but we only have to look at the spending review and the sort of strictures that have been put on departments to understand that waiting probably won't be for much longer. But yes, it's unhelpful that we don't have that sort of clarity just yet. I don't know whether Gary's got any specific information on how that impacts sort of some of the funded streams the police are involved in.
I don't know the specific detail, but I don't think it hinders our work really in terms of what we're doing. We're absolutely committed, and it's fantastic to hear you talk about the neighbourhood policing officers and what they're trying to do. That plan, what they're doing, how they're doing it, it's not going to change. We've got funding issues, but funding is there to do what we need to do in our key areas, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. In the direction from both sort of the police and crime plan locally, but our Chief Constable is absolutely clear about what he wants us to do, and it's in line with exactly what you're saying that you want and what we're going to keep doing.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. There's so much stuff in there that is so positive, so encouraging. Some things I wasn't aware was happening right on my doorstep, so it's really useful to read that. I attend town centre forums across Chatham and Rochester, and I think you are right that the community policing efforts are being noticed. So specifically, I remember attending one meeting of Rochester City Centre Forum, and there was quite a lot of anger about the police not responding to antisocial behaviour around homelessness and things like that. And then I attended the next meeting a couple of months down the line, and it was such a dramatic turn. You know, people were saying how much they've noticed police presence and how much the officers have engaged. They've gone and proactively spoken to businesses. So it is getting around. But I worry that it's still the cohort of town centre businesses who are already quite engaged with the town centre forums. They are the ones primarily noticing the difference. So there are still businesses on sort of the intra side of Rochester High Street and around Boundary Road, some corner shops that I've spoken to recently who say that, well, we don't really have trust in reporting anything to the police. They don't do anything. So I would like to suggest that there's still a bit more work to be done in terms of distilling that message down to everybody to make it that, you know, and it's also about the reporting process. I think it's not, I think people feel like the reports, it's a bit tricky to fill out forms and do things. You can't just pick up the phone anymore and speak to somebody. So these are the kind of things I hear. So I think it's all going in the right direction. I guess I'm just playing devil's advocate.
No, and I absolutely agree with you. I think your point is a fair one. I think there's ways in which we can police our town centres better. There's more ways in which we can engage. And I suppose the test will be sitting here in a year's time whether you see what we are planning to do has made a difference. I would say keep an eye on local policing events and we'll inform you via the CSP what we're going to do. But the aim is to have days where we have a significant footprint in our town centres, where we go out and engage with people in different ways, not just the online faceless ways in which the world has gone to some extent, but having people that come in and engage with you in the way that you want to engage, because not everyone is online, not everyone has got a significant presence. Some of my officers, not my beat officers, but local policing-wise, they're new to policing. The challenge is that all they've known is texting people and WhatsApping people. Even that's probably out of date. I'm probably showing my significant age in that regard, but there is still absolutely the place for people speaking to members of the public, finding out what their issues are, what their problems are. And the only way they'll do that in town centres is being out on their feet, going into shops, speaking to people, saying, what's the problem here? How can we help you? And actually dealing with it. Talking about it's not good enough. So we'll see where we go with that. I've got some plans, I've got some ideas, some of which are detailed here, some of which I've detailed to Councillor Patterson and other colleagues in here. And Paul Diddams is with me, behind me. He's the new Community Safety Inspector for Medway. He's a local resident. He's also fully behind these plans, and I'll be holding him to account to deliver those for you.
Thank you. I also wanted to ask about things like the Clear Hold Build project around Chatham, Bryan Street. That's fantastic. That sounds so great. I just wondered how you identified that location and how do you measure the success for this project? And I'm just curious, can this be rolled out to other parts, other areas? How would you kind of gauge that?
So Clear Hold Build's a national project run by the Home Office to identify areas of particular need or issue within local communities across the country. It was originally linked to organised crime, and we were asked to roll it out in Medway. That area was picked for its crime rates, its challenges in a wider sense. We talked about drugs earlier, and I suppose you'd look at that within the report, and if that's not your area, you'd think, well, it's all well and good there, but the police are just there, just solving them problems. I'd say we're not, is the argument to that regard. But in terms of measuring success, I've asked to look at crime rates at the start, which are one factor to look at it and see what we've been able to achieve, whether they go up or down. Sometimes that's hard to say whether that's positive or negative because we've engaged with a hell of a lot more people, and building the trust for them to report offences may see crime go up in a paradox in that sense. But we'll be looking at crime rates, we'll be looking at mostly and most importantly what people think from our surveying with it who live in that area to see what the impact of that work has been. And then I think moving forward we'll be looking at what other areas are seeing particular challenges within Medway where that kind of focused approach might have a huge impact. And it won't always just be crime rate, it will be looking at what our surveying saying, what members of the public are saying, what my beat officers coming back and saying from local policing. So in short, to answer your question, we picked it on a number of metrics, as it were. We've got a number of ways we're looking to see whether it's really had an impact. Most notably, that'll be what the public tell us. And moving forward, absolutely, I think we can use it across Medways in different places to have significant impact and bring around change where crime is happening the most and affecting the most people within Medway.
Just also to add to that, I mean, I think in terms of the measure of success, sometimes there's no helpful Excel document that's going to tell you the success rate, but the community day that was held there in September, which I know Stephen was at and Paul was at as well, and representation from public health and various other agencies. You know, the very fact that that was being held in an area that previously was seen to be worthy of this sort of intervention, I think spoke volumes, and we had quite a bit of interest from the broadcast media there, and of course they're never slow to find negativity if they can in the reporting of something like this, and actually the reports that went out on broadcast news struggled to find anyone without a positive to take away from it, and the fact that people were willing to speak about these issues, I think, was also really heartening. You know, it was giving the community a bit of agency in terms of what was happening in an area where perhaps previously might have felt that they had been abandoned, and I think that was a really heartening experience to be there.
Thank you, Chair, for being lenient with me. Final point, it's interesting to read about your priorities for violence reduction against women and girls. Now, when we were in opposition, Councillor Zoe Van Dyke, she led on a piece of work where she basically organized these stalls in every town in Medway, and we spoke to lots of women and girls on the street, asking them how safe they felt, and really good report was put together, and it was all presented to the previous administration. So I was there helping her with that on a couple of those stalls. And do you know, so many of the young women we spoke to, they basically said it was about street lighting. And so sometimes it's those really small, simple things that will contribute to women feeling safer, women and girls feeling safer. So I'm just raising that sometimes it's worth looking at those kind of things to improve people's sense of safety.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll continue with those stalls, the walk and talks that will happen in the town centres. We've got our child centre policing teams in schools listening to exactly that kind of representation about what is really affecting them and their perception of how safe they feel within Medway. And from what they say, we'll then take on environmental surveys for particular areas to try and solve some problems, one of which is the Great Lines, which we looked at has been an area of issue and concern for people, whatever their activity, walking dogs, playing, socialising with friends and family, walking across it late at night. We've just managed to look at some national funding through the serious violence hotspot zones, one of which falls in that area where we're going to be looking to get some CCTV in that area to deal with exactly the kind of issues and representations that were made by women and girls saying they didn't feel safe and how that might change it. So I think your point again is absolutely spot on the money, and we'll be following that up throughout the year.
Just also to broaden this even beyond this panel of partners to some of the work that we are hoping to do in the new year with the Medway Licensed Taxi Drivers Association in terms of through the sort of licensing team working on delivering bystander training to taxi drivers as well. So they've got a really important role to play in creating that feeling of safety around the nighttime economy, and there's a strong message to be put out there in terms of you know, making a plan for your journey home and to keep safe and to use a licensed cab. So we can use lots of different tools within the council's toolbox, but also with sort of wider partners to do that. And so my understanding is that is now scheduled for around February time to coincide with Valentine's Day, but watch this space.
Great to hear. Thank you. I just wanted to bring up two separate topics. Firstly, I'm going to join other colleagues in publicly thanking my local beat PC. So PC Charlotte McGowan is absolutely invaluable in Shrewd North and Finsbury. In terms of one issue that I see a lot of, that has been mentioned a lot as an area that's not necessarily got as much attention and has seen an increase, is particularly around shoplifting. And USDOR, the trade union that represents shop workers, have brought out some very concerning data in terms of the safety of shop workers. Is there, obviously, this is data-led, and this is facing the concerns that we see in the partnership survey, but particularly in terms of policing, is there any focused activities to help support our small businesses that are vital to the livelihood of our communities?
Yes, absolutely, is the short answer to that. In terms of shoplifting, it will never drop off or be a crime that we ignore. Some of the national issues are not mirrored locally in terms of there are other forces that may not investigate these to the sense that we do. I've got a crime team that look at it, that deal with charging people that are shoplifting. So I think we had 42 charges for shoplifting in November, and 40 before that. We'll continue to charge and investigate the crimes. Our local beat officers, local communities will engage in the town centres. They're going to continue to do that, look at safeguarding, look at target hardening shops and dealing with people. We've also got intelligence-led policing, which is run in our areas. So we're looking at the people that are committing the most crime in our areas. A lot of those are shoplifters. They will go up as targets for us to work on and to deal with, because ultimately some of the majority of the time these people are prolific, and we need to deal with them and identify them. So yes, we're going to target them in all manner of senses. We've also got to do that wider partnership work of trying to help those people that need wider support from other services that are here, that takes away the reason why they may well be shoplifting. Now, that's not within my gift across the whole of society and some of the wider issues that are out there, but my job's to catch criminals and help protect businesses that are trying to earn an honest and decent living in what are tough circumstances, I've no doubt. So absolutely we'll continue to focus on that, Councillor, in the year ahead.
I would just also specifically mention the work done by the Safer Medway partnership as well, which is I suppose something that operates in two different levels. So during the day, it's generally shops who are sharing intelligence around people who are causing trouble, shoplifters, and with radio contact both with each other and with police. And that same service then sort of takes on a slightly different role, sort of addressing Councillor Campbell's point about the nighttime economy, so that the security staff on licensed premises are able to also share information on people who have been identified as troublemakers or up to no good. So there's a whole manner of things happening, day and night, in partnership with the police on this.
Thank you. The other topic I wanted to discuss was obviously over the last few months, due to a crisis in prison capacity, we've seen the fact that prisoners have had to be released less time into to their jail sentences. I just wanted to understand, obviously there's some really good information in these reports about what the probation service is doing to manage this. I just wanted to give a little bit more time to just understand what impacts this is in Medway and what strategies and actions we are taking to, obviously you can't magic out probation officers out of the air, but how we're able to work with greater pressures in terms of that work and what can be done to support that.
Thank you. Yeah, it has been, there have been a lot of people released early from custody. What we did in North Kent, particularly for Medway, is on the 2 days where we had the SDS release days, so in October and September, the 2 days where people were released early, we had a high volume of people being released from custody. On one day, we organised a multi-agency arrangement to that. We invited partners from drug services, from housing, from various different places to attend the probation office so that those people being released from custody early, who had very short notice of an earlier release date, had various partners in one place to be able to support them. So a lot of these announcements from the government have come at very short notice. As we all know, I think the media found out before we did, so we've had to act very quickly on that, but we have done our best to work with partners and share that information. I know that we held partners meetings, which our head of service, Linda Marsh, attended with the various, with the 2 different heads in Kent to explain to partners what we were doing, how it was working, and we shared with our police colleagues and other partners the names of those people being released from custody on those certain days so that we could plan and prepare as much in advance. I feel like I've answered as much of your question as I can, but if there's anything more specific you need, I'm more than happy to answer or take that back.
That was very helpful. Are there any other members? Aha, our hands are coming up. So we'll go for Councillor Hine first and then Councillor Peake.
Thank you, Chair. So I've just been typing it out now because I was scared I was going to...
Councillor Hine first, please.
Oh, sorry. I thought you said Councillor...
Thank you, Chair. Just an observation on the online survey. Of course, 103 respondents completed the survey this year compared to 107 last year. And I see that it had a reach of 12,800 people. So, of course, that was seen by over 12,000 people, but yet only 100 responded. So I think for next year, it might be just worth looking at other platforms that could be used to try and increase engagement from a wider cross-section of the Medway community. I don't know whether it was Facebook or whatever we used to advertise the survey, but it's certainly worth looking at other social media sites out there that could be used as well. Just to comment on that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair comment. I think we would always want there to be greater engagement just to provide that variety of views, because I think when you have a limited number of respondents, they can be self-selecting, and so you perhaps get a skewed picture of people who are unhappy with one particular gripe while the majority remain silent. So there's a variety of ways that we can do that, and certainly there's a comms piece, no question. And we've talked on this committee when I was sitting in Councillor Field's chair around some of the tech options that we can explore in terms of presenting these surveys or the invitation to complete these surveys in conjunction with other council services. So when people engage with the council on a particular issue, is there an opportunity to then engage them with any consultations which are happening at that time? So I'll continue to work with officers in exploring as and when these things are taking place, whether we are doing everything possible to share them far and wide.
Thank you. Councillor Peake, please.
Make sure I got it right this time. Thank you, Chair. Actually, following good timing with Councillor Hine and the desire to expand the survey, because this year 103 people. I mean, this is not a criticism. It's the way of the world, isn't it? It's not a high number. And it's good to do surveys, and it'll be good to do comparison next year. But when you see something like this just because it's written down doesn't mean it's the whole story by any means. And it is human nature that if any of us, especially as politicians, would do a survey or a petition, you can guarantee that a significantly higher percentage of those that respond are those that got something to moan about, because we all do this. We all, when something goes well and we've got what we want, just take it for granted, because it's how it should be. It's not until you're against something or disappointed with something. So when you look at the comparison of the figures, you may be laced with a disproportionate number of negativity, and there is a link to a particular constituent I can think of. But it's really good to have this dialogue. It is the text that gives it contexture. Is that the right word? That really, really helps. I'm really pleased by your responses, by the way. You know, the positive responses that you've said, with your ambition, that is really, really good, including the idea about education of children. But unfortunately, it's not just children, is it? It is parents. And it's a bit of a bug with me, is the lack of responsibility that parents would take, who do not instill, especially in young people, the necessary discipline and self-control and regard and consideration and manners that you should be instilled with. And along with Councillor Cook, down there, we have a particular issue along several roads, including Wolseley Road, with young people without any high vis, no helmet, riding quad bikes literally in the centre of a road. So you've got ongoing traffic coming either way. And you think, for goodness sakes, if we could talk to the parents, you've got any concept about how dangerous your children are in, even if you don't care about anybody else. But linking with that, I also would like to say, along with Councillor Cook, how pleased we are, particularly with PC Matt Amos, who's our designated police officer. This has made a difference. We've had several surgeries together, and he came to a surgery when we had a particular constituent, and this is the link to not always get what you want, because this constituent will never get what he wants because we just don't do it anymore. But it was his positive attitude, engaging with him, is his positive attitude of actually going to knock on doors of certain people and talking with them, and his sense of presence. I'll get there soon. And this now links with a conversation I had with Chatham residents only on Tuesday afternoon about drugs. So I wasn't surprised to see on page 21.7.3, 7.4, those issues recognised as being the greatest concern, and the highest number being drug-related. And amongst these people we're talking about is their fear about drugs taking in Chatham. And I try to say it is particularly contained in certain areas. I have some knowledge of this because I work in mental health. I know about Billy the Quid and other characters like that, but that didn't appease them. And I'll leave you with just one example and then a plea that you must have heard so many times about police presence. So the social group, they're quite elderly. Bear in mind I'm the youngest there, so that is saying something. We quite often go to Central Theatre. We go out. Usually, if it's somewhere else, we'll go for a drink. But in Chatham, you come out of the theatre, there's a bunch of characters out there, and they're scared because of their behaviour and no police presence. And therefore, we walk away and don't continue our evening out, and that is a shame. So, obviously, the same old plea about police presence, if possible, at certain times. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. I want to start off again by saying we had a brilliant community ward meeting with our local PC and public health and Medway, looking at the ways that we could creatively change in the ward, and it was brilliant. So thank you all for that. But two things that are not necessarily on this report, but you brought up, so I'm going to jump on it. Last time at this committee, we talked about a policy around dogs. And I think some people thought that maybe it wasn't of high priority, but I see dog attacks. I know people don't go to read Common because they're worried about dog attacks. I also have reports of people that have assistance dogs that are now not going out because they're worried that dogs off the lead are going to interfere with their assistance dog. So I think it is a problem we need to start looking into. And the second one was about county lines. I know that the National Task Group Force with Dan Chief, I want to get his title right, I'm going to get it wrong. Chief Superintendent Dan Mitchell is now going in and looking and working with care experienced children and young people and also children with maybe hidden disabilities that are either undiagnosed because, and I'm not going to try and quote them, but I know that the prison service now, there's some figures coming back that how many percentage of, it's quite higher than they thought, with people with undiagnosed hidden disabilities. So what are we doing? I mean, I know that they're going into primary schools and trying to focus on county lines because that's the age we really need to start getting these children now. So I just wondered if we were doing some work around that as well.
So I'll take the first issue first. In terms of dangerous dogs, absolutely a priority. Ironically, Inspector Paul Diddams is the single point of contact for dogs in Medway. We've seized dozens of dogs at a cost of hundreds of thousands of pounds. We won't stop doing that. Finances won't stop us doing it. So in the widest strategic sense, it is an absolute focus. And tragically, there was an incident in Folkestone only yesterday. So it is absolutely on my radar. If I hear about that daily on our intelligence meeting, I'll make sure something's done about it. Our beat and ward officers will engage and try and find out what the local problems are, and we absolutely will act, because we can't have people not going out and enjoying local parks, areas, communities, especially assistance dogs. We failed in policing if that's the case. So that will remain a priority for us. I can assure you of that over the next 12 months. In terms of drugs, I won't talk about the wider educational piece, but we do have a child-centred policing team. I know that there was some resource that were removed from schools, not last year, maybe the year before, but we've got a number of people working in there. They're actively in our primary schools, particularly in particularly challenging areas, engaging with the children there, engaging with the teachers, engaging with social services, engaging with health to give that support and the widest possible assistance to keep people away from that kind of behaviour, to prevent them, A, becoming drug users and B, becoming involved in wider criminality and causing some problems so they don't achieve what they should achieve in life. And that's the challenge of us as a CSP more widely. So, yeah, a huge focus for my child-centred policing team.
I was just going to add in as well around the prevention and education. Obviously, Kent Fire and Rescue Service have statutory responsibilities under serious violence duty, so we're a tool that can be used as well. Over the summer holidays, we ran an Aspire programme, which was an educational intervention programme that was targeting around young people going into derelict buildings, but that could also be sort of used to combat county lines. We also have an education team that's using a new targeting programme around the schools that it goes out to. So there's lots of different ways that as a partnership we can start to influence behaviour. So it doesn't necessarily just need to be a policing perspective. And just touching back on Smith's comments around town centres, you know, around Vorg, we take part in sort of those walk and talk events, but also we can start to lever our own assets to be present in certain locations at certain times that could potentially make people feel safer as well. So there's lots of different avenues that we can sort of take as a partnership. So it doesn't necessarily just need to be a policing perspective around combating those.
Thank you. And just to kind of continue adding about the attention that is being paid to county lines and preventing young people getting involved, it's not just local police. We're also in regular contact with the South East Regional Organised Crime Unit, their county lines unit. They've recently put on a lot of training days for police and for the wider system to say how can we safeguard young people that do find themselves getting caught up in this, looking at them as kind of victims as well, and then giving them support. So it is at local and regional level that young people are working hard to try and protect young people.
Thank you. We'll go Councillor Myton. Councillor Williams, did you want to come? Oh, Councillor Lammas, actually. You haven't been in yet, so sorry. We'll go, so Councillor Myton, Councillor Lammas, and did you want to come back in, Councillor? Yeah. And then we'll wrap up this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one, or two quick questions, is on page 34, you've got a pie chart of a breakdown of crimes, and you mentioned 5 wards in particular being the top wards. And as somebody who is a councillor for one of those, the successor wards to that, alongside Councillor Campbell and Councillor Patterson, I just wondered if at some point you could provide us with a breakdown of, as it were, that pie chart, but by ward, just to get an idea about what those crimes are by wards, you know, because it is quite concerning. And another quick question is, you've talked about best bar none and Project Vigilant. I know from a while back there was a lot of concern in the local press about particular night businesses, and one in particular, I won't name names, and how a lot of crime in Medway basically was as a result of that business in particular. How do you engage with businesses, shall we say, who, as it were, you know, crimes come from those either directly or indirectly? And is there any, other than things like licensing, are there any sort of sticks rather than carrots that, you know, you've got in your toolbox that you know that you can use, and you've been able to engage with those, and have they got any better?
So I know you mentioned licensing in itself, but licensing probably is the biggest stick because it's the stick that can close a business down. So they're particularly active in Medway. We've got the team. They're a central team, but they work out of Medway, so they're keen to get involved in all the issues. If there are businesses and areas of particular concern, we will deal with them robustly. If they're breaking the law, we'll deal with crime outside of there, and we will look at all the tools that we've got in our arsenal to look at closure orders and all of that kind of stuff if there are ongoing and consistent problems. So we'll keep doing that in the year ahead.
Thank you. Councillor Lammas.
Thank you, Chair. And hello. Apologies for being late. I did leave Westminster by car at 4 p.m. But that was not enough time, so apologies to the committee. My question relates to violence against women and girls. I understand a question was asked on it before I arrived, but I understand that my particular focus is on virginity testing and hymenoplasty. All of your projects, Project Vigilance, the Ladies' Night, the other things seem to be in response to statistics-led crime, which of course most crime is statistics-led. However, in 2022 we outlawed in the United Kingdom, the whole United Kingdom, so-called virginity testing and corrective procedures to remake a woman virgin, often called hymenoplasty, which was done on the NHS. It's obviously a crime that's involved heavily amongst certain communities, often but not always prior to arranged marriages. Given the heinous nature of this crime, the fact that it's so hidden, could you please tell me what you guys are doing in your focus under tackling violence against women and girls on that specific thing, especially given Matthew Scott, Police Crime Commissioner, was a champion on this matter, and Medway was the first local authority nationwide to pass a motion on this matter. Thank you, Chair.
So I suppose there's 2 points that I'd make in relation to that. One is a partnership approach, because often it's through health and education and awareness and working with schools, so that will continue. Secondly, in terms of if offences and offenders are identified, we've got a designated child protection team that are at Medway that will assess the evidence, assess what's there, and if there's crimes committed, the enforcement will happen in the most robust way, because protecting children must be absolutely at the heart of everything we do and number one priority.
If you may indulge me, Chair, I thank Chief Inspector for that answer. I think essentially the only way to do this is through education in schools. Can you give me the assurance, though, that when the police or your partners go to schools, they do currently mention virginity testing and hymenoplasty when they go and speak to schools? Because the only way these young girls are going to find out that this is now a crime is through education. Is that already on the presentation you give?
Thank you, Councillor. I would like to tell you about the PHSE training pack that the Medway have put together. It's shared among schools so they can give quality relationships and sex education as part of that. I will speak to my team who organised that and find out what's actually in that pack and come back to you with a response to that. And if not, then I'll encourage them to look at how it can be included within the curriculum.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
And for the final question, Councillor Williams.
Just a quick one for Chloe, if I may. As we know, stopping reoffending is a key to crime reduction. I just wonder, what is the sort of state of the probation service? Do you have trouble like we do with recruiting and keeping social workers? Is it a problem with the probation service? You want to get a feel of how you stand?
Thank you. Yeah, unfortunately, there is a recruitment issue. We are short-staffed in Medway, unfortunately, for probation officers. So these are qualified probation officers. That's a national picture, which unfortunately is greater within the South East, particularly Kent. We are looking at, and we have been working nationally on a geographical allowance request to help recruit and retain staff in this area. We haven't been successful with that so far because recruitment and retention in Kent is such an issue, especially for North Kent, where Medway, Gravesend, Dartford border London, where probation service staff receive London waiting. That is a huge issue for us, unfortunately. What we are doing in response to that is we are over-recruiting for our probation service officers and case admin who can support some of our probation officers to train and recruit probation officers. It takes years of training, including degree qualifications. We have got in Medway 8 qualifying in the new year, and we are constantly recruiting new trainee probation officers. We have nationally increased our social media campaigns around trainee probation officer recruitment, and we have been really successful with that. And in North Kent, we have asked for as many vacancies to be placed in our area as possible because we do want to recruit and retain as many probation officers as we can. We are quite successful locally with retention and recruitment for probation service officers. We are, like I say, we're consistently over-recruiting probation service officers where we can, but nationally probation officer recruitment is an issue.
Right, thanks for that. And just seems similar to social workers, doesn't it? Is that the same sort of line?
So, yeah.
But it is being trying to be addressed. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely.
Excellent, thank you all. I'm now going to pass to Vice Chair Councillor Cook for a proposal.
Thank you very much. While I've got the mic, I'll say, in response to Councillor Lamas's point, I have just checked the Keeping Children Safe in Education 2024 as well, just to reassure that in terms of the safeguarding that we're all following in schools, FGM and honour-based violence is a particular part of the curriculum in that as well. So just to add that from my day job. In terms of the recommendations, the committee is requested to note the findings of the strategic assessment. The committee is asked to support the proposed CSP priorities in light of the strategic assessment findings. The committee is requested to scrutinise the activity of the Community Safety Partnership over the past year in connection with the discharge by the responsible authorities of the crime and disorder functions. And lastly, we've had the specific request for the ward breakdown as put forward by Councillor Maritime. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Okay. Is that agreed? Thank you very much, and thank you to all our partners today who've helped to support this important scrutiny, and wish you all the best in trying to ensure that we have a safer Medway. So thank you. Thank you. Chief Inspector.
Can I just say a massive thank you to you all. The summer was particularly challenging with the very serious assault of Lieutenant Colonel Mark Seaton up at the barracks, and then we had national disturbance issues. I think we saw the very best of Medway at that time, but the CSP chair, our local MPs, the partners on here, and most importantly you in your wards, and the support you gave us as a police service to deal with those issues was absolutely amazing. So it would be remiss of me not to say thank you to you all. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. If you want to leave now, except for Councillor Patterson, thank you for your time this evening. Okay, so we're now going to go on to the next agenda item, which is the attendance of the portfolio holder for community safety, highways and enforcement. Councillor Patterson, will you introduce this item, and we'll have about 25 minutes of discussion on it.
Yeah, I don't want to eat into members' time for questions, but obviously taking on the portfolio in July, some fantastic work being done by officers already, and work that had been put in place by the previous portfolio holder. So primarily my first task was to make sure that continued at pace, and since then obviously sort of picking up various other strands of work along the way. Pleased to see things like the public spaces protection order on dog control being approved by council, and so lots of things coming forward down the line, but happy to take members' questions.
Okay, any member? Councillor Filmer.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for the report. I know what a wonderful job they do in frontline services. Now, I haven't actually got any questions for you, and what I'm going to ask is not politically based. Two things. Historically, we've had opportunities to apply for grants for highways infrastructure. We put in a bid for like the A228 for upgrading. I'm just wondering if there is an opportunity you would bear in mind the A289, the Wainscott bypass coming down to 4 Elms Hill, is a really bad pinch point. So if you could bear that in mind. The other one, and I promise you this is not political, school streets. Now, I understand the rationale behind school streets because I used to have a lot of problems with certain schools. Not saying I would do a blanket cover, but some schools require it. Now, I think in some literature you put out, you said that if there was surplus money from what comes in from school streets, could you bear in mind Halling Primary School is desperate for a permanent crossing for the children? That's the two things, and I promise you they weren't politically based.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Filmer. And I wholeheartedly agree. Frontline Services team are doing a fantastic job for the people of Medway day in, day out. And, in inclement weather, we tend to notice it a little bit more and perhaps have more sympathy, but they're out rain, hail and shine. On the sort of funding for particular road improvement works, that's noted. There is a process by which works are prioritised in terms of traffic flows, need, and of course limitations of budget. But you can be assured that you've put that on record here tonight, and I'm sure officers will be happy to advise on anything else that can be done. And I would certainly encourage all members to continue to speak up for their communities in terms of any particular areas of need. You are our eyes and ears across Medway, and it's really important that we hear those voices. On school streets, yes, sadly, when there is non-compliance, that does result in penalty charge notice being issued, and some income is derived from that. And certainly, I'm clear that is something that should be reinvested in the goals of the school street scheme, primarily the safety of children on their way to and from school. So, you know, again, funding for crossings sits slightly outside that active travel budget per se, because obviously school streets, the part of the argument for nudging that sort of modal shift from door-to-door service for young people being taken to and from school is to try and encourage a little bit of that journey to take place in an active manner. I agree that crossings can contribute to that, but it's a case of officers, obviously, sometimes, you know, as you can imagine, in times of a great shortage of funding, officers have to be creative to make sure that we are able to justify these bits of expenditure. But you know, I've seen already just how creative they can be in making sure we're able to do these things. So again, you've made your point.
Thank you. Next, Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I was just going to touch on the school crossing patrol service. Just recently, we asked for a consultation be done for Wainscott School, and I just found out a couple of weeks ago they are going to get a crossing. The old lollipop lady, I think we call them. So they will be getting that. It says on the report there's 19 patrols serving our school communities in Medway, and further be progressed. Is there a chance of getting a list of the 19 schools that have a crossing?
Yeah, I'm sure that can be provided by officers. I mean, there's certainly been a couple of new ones added to the list. I sort of note the one which operates across the Vines, serving King's School in Rochester. I mean, these things are really important. You know, they promote obviously road safety, but also that intangible sense that children are being looked after on their way to school, and that encourages that active travel. So, yeah, I'm really pleased to see it. It doesn't come cheap, but I do think it's got a really significant role to play in you know, encouraging and moving us towards a situation where, you know, even the people represented in this room, when we were all at school, there were far more children would have walked than do today. And I think the impact of that has been really negative, not only on the environment in terms of the sort of pollution and the congestion on our roads, but also in children's health. You know, I was at a meeting today which was talking about our goals in terms of tackling childhood obesity. So again, you know, it's about going back to source. It's about being holistic in our approach, and so I see, you know, although on the face of it, you might not see the connection between community safety, highways and enforcement and childhood obesity, but I think, you know, it's been a hallmark, certainly of my time on Cabinet, that there's that sort of cross-cutting work being done, that we don't operate in silos, and we all see the value of each other's portfolio and delivering on those outcomes. So, yeah, absolutely agree on that.
Yeah, I think having school patrols does sort of encourage people to walk to school as well. So, you know, the more we got, the good. But a list, if you could, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lammas.
Thank you, Chair. My question is to do with the maintenance of the road surface. I noted in the report that you said that Faulkner Highways consistently meet their KPIs. My observation of Luton Road is that it's in its worst state I've ever seen it in and needs serious work. I mean, Luton Road is in a really bad nick, so I'd encourage you to look into Luton Road. My question pertains to the AI technology. Previously, when I've discussed what drives decision-making about traffic management across the Medway towns, it was pretty much only police-given deaf data. There wasn't really much intelligence other than that, so I'm excited to see the opportunities from this. Do you see this providing data that can help things with sort of sequencing of traffic lights, better mapping of routes, particularly one-way systems, which often cause bottlenecks, Or is this just in lieu of people visiting road surfaces complaints to see if they're valid or not? I just wanted to know what the gist is on that. Thank you.
So it doesn't quite sit under this committee. As part of my portfolio is the Medway 2.0 project, which comes under scrutiny from Business Support Committee. But I think there is a great ambition on the part of the Council to make use and to exploit these new technologies in all the ways that we are aware they can help us now, but also to be open to other opportunities. So certainly I can see the value, yes, of there's obviously the opportunity to use those sensors and cameras to track the quality of the road surface and to be much more on the ball in terms of detecting problems before they get, because obviously, you know, the best time to fix a pothole is before it becomes a pothole. You know, the gradual degradation of roads like Luton Road obviously hasn't happened overnight, but it does obviously reach then that critical point where action is triggered. In terms of using AI to look at traffic flows, that's something that I think certainly I'm keen to find out what more can be done using our, you know, we've got ANPR enforcement cameras. Is there anything that can be done to use those to track the flow of traffic? There's certainly audits already done on traffic flows on key routes, but I think you're right. I think the opportunities are absolutely myriad for artificial intelligence, but also just good old-fashioned human intelligence as well in making use of those tools.
Thank you. Councillor Brake.
Thank you very much, Chair. One area to home in on, if I may please, and that is that since the introduction of red routes across the whole of Medway, has this improved traffic flow, and in particular, the red route in Raynham, which was a bone of contention by local residents? Has there been an improvement in traffic flow? If the answer to it is yes, by how much, please? Thank you.
So in terms of hard data on traffic flows, that's not something that I have to hand. But what I would say is that we had a really useful workshop a couple of months ago with the bus companies, the bus operators in Medway, and they highlighted as something that had been really advantageous for their punctuality and for their timetabling had been the introduction of red routes, and they actually singled out the red route in Raynham as being of particular benefit, and I think that makes sense in terms of the fact that it was the one which protected a road which is at points single carriageway. So when someone does stop there, they really do make a nuisance of themselves. So at the moment, certainly the anecdotal evidence is that they are beneficial at the very least for the punctuality of buses and for the flow of that traffic. And I think if that's the case, then it's reasonable to surmise that they are offering benefits to other road users as well. But I'll obviously be keeping an eye on the data, and we do produce those reports in terms of the traffic flows. I've certainly seen them when I've been a member of this committee, so I'll be watching with great interest on what the news is on that. But it has to be recognised that we have a growing population in Medway. We have so many more cars on the road year on year. So I would say that even standing still would be an achievement. So it's important that we don't necessarily expect any measure that we take, whether it's red routes or any other moving traffic offence enforcement, such as the yellow boxes. These are not panaceas, but what they do is they certainly create, I hope, a perception of fair enforcement, that there is actually people with an expectation that enforcement will happen, because in all of these offences or in all of these bits of enforcement, they aren't really doing anything new. They are merely changing, in the case of red routes, the enforcement from Kent Police into the hands of the council. There were never places that people should have been parking anyway, so it's really just adapting and making sure that people know that if they do continue to behave in a selfish manner and drive in a selfish manner, that they will be punished for it.
Thank you for that, Councillor Patterson. Obviously, I didn't expect you to sort of just turn a page and say, coincidentally, I've got that information at first. I didn't expect that, but thank you for that. Interesting responses, but of course, yellow lines, now red lines, is in fact enforcement by the local authority. That is something that is was taken away from the police and felt that it was more effective to put it with the local authority. So, whilst I didn't expect you to be able to produce that information tonight, I think what would be very useful for this committee is to have an understanding of how effective the red lines have been in actually doing what they were set out to do. And yes, you've given us examples of the bus service, and yes, we can understand that. But I think that if there's data available which can actually demonstrate the worth of the however much it costs to introduce red lines across the whole of Medway, would be very useful, please. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, and I think we can put that down as a recommendation as well on that. And but just to expand on this point, so you're seeing success of some of the red routes. Are there other areas in Medway that potentially might be identified for that? I may be thinking specifically in my ward of the town centre area of Strood, the one-way system, the gyratory. And again, also with that, you mentioned working with our bus colleagues. Is there work, and again, you mentioned the local transport plan being developed, is there work to identify measures to ensure that buses aren't delayed by increasing congestion, and actually that increases the attractiveness of services and actually in turn will reduce traffic?
Yes, Chair, you took the words out of my mouth. I mean, I think Strood is the obvious example of somewhere which would arguably benefit from these things. I'm really careful as a portfolio holder not to turn this job into me tackling, any number of personal hobby horses. So, I would definitely take guidance from officers, but sometimes that guidance is prompted by an observation, and I think it's an absolutely fair observation that the stretch in Strood Town Centre, particularly the area just short of the sort of traffic lights near Iceland, the number of times that you see cars parking and blocking one lane of traffic there, I mean, it's endless, and they do it because they clearly believe, perhaps rightly, that they're going to get away with it. It's quite clear, we've heard from Gary tonight about the challenges that Kent Police face in tackling what some people might consider real crime. And I'm absolutely clear that they have a responsibility to do what we can. And now that we have the regulations to enforce moving traffic offences in Medway, then I'm open to looking into any place where they might benefit. I think we shouldn't assume that it's always going to be a town centre. It's whether it's in rural areas or the link roads to rural areas. These schemes have existed in various forms for decades, whether it's urban clearways or whatever. And so clearly we understand the value in keeping the traffic flowing and stopping people from behaving in a selfish way which impedes other traffic. The intractable thing, I think, up to now has been how to enforce that without a massive increase in manpower. And the ANPR enforcement, I think, is probably the best compromise we're going to find at the present moment on that, in that while it will perhaps trigger a review of an alleged incident, everything is still going through a human being. For all the talk about artificial intelligence, these things are still being viewed by human beings, so there is still consideration being given to the circumstances in which an offence might be committed. I just think it's not part of the question, but that's worth pointing out as we move towards the enforcement of things like yellow box junctions, that there was concern, for example, the one which will be in place protecting the Canal Road junction, Rochester Bridge, in terms of whether people might end up being caught in it by accident, because there's quite a lot of jockeying for position goes on between the two lanes there, people cutting in and cutting each other up. And I just want to reassure members, but also members of the public, that there is a human element to this, and that if there are circumstances which mitigate the reasons for the contravention, then they will be considered, and so the intention is to improve traffic flow. That's the primary goal, and that's what I will deem it to be a success based on.
Excellent, thank you for that. We've got about 10 minutes left. I've got Councillor Cook, Campbell and Peake. So if we have nice, short, succinct contributions, that'd be great. And then if there's any last people who want to come in, please indicate. So, Councillor Cook.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of specific areas we haven't touched on. I was quite concerned about 1013 and 1014 around overrepresentation of people with neurodifference in the prevent space, and particularly as a parent of a child with neurodifference and on the HASC committee, very aware of the pressures on NELFT in terms of diagnosis and in the support in that area. And then we've looked again at HASC about the ongoing longer waits for people with additional support as an adult. So really concerned there that there might be something we're missing around work between this area and then with our health teams around ensuring support for our children at particularly vulnerable stages, support for staff. And I was particularly concerned about it saying that even where pupils are undiagnosed, professionals who know the student well report that they often present with ASC. That relies on staff being trained enough to spot autistic spectrum condition evidence, which particularly in girls can often be masked. That concerns me as a safeguarding gap. So I just wanted to explore that. The second area was back to a question I've asked before around unauthorised encampments and site hardening. Pleased to see that in section 17. It's something we've looked at in our ward with Hook Meadow. We've been grateful for officer support. I think there's still more to do. So if we could just explore more about more being available for that. And then with that and with the Equalities Act rightly mentioned, again, we know local plan is progressing. There will be discussion, I know, about longer term solutions, but what do we do in the interim? Thank you.
So, again, the fact that that falls in the report where it's me here on my own means that I don't have Steve to refer to in terms of the sort of health aspects of what you're discussing. All I can say is that we have that sort of cross-cutting approach within Cabinet. So that's something that I think I'll raise with colleagues who are responsible for children's services and schools, because I think that you're pointing out something which sort of crosses into areas which are sort of not under my purview as such. I mean, that section on prevent and about the impact of extreme right-wing ideology, we saw that come to a head, and Gary mentioned it just at the end there about the importance of tracking these behaviours and spotting those vulnerabilities. And I think regardless of what we might think of the behaviour of some of those individuals during that violence in August, it's quite clear that they are as much victims of their own ignorance and the ideologies that have been pressed upon them as they were acting on their own agency. So I think it's really important that we make sure that those particular vulnerabilities in autistic spectrum disorder are picked up on and acted on. But I'll pick that up with colleagues. And sorry, the second part, we were talking about encampments. Again, it's an area where there's a sort of element of crossover between myself and Councillor Prenter in the housing portfolio. So my particular responsibility is in terms of the enforcement aspects of that. I'm certainly pleased that the duties on the council have been discharged in an appropriate and humane way, but there are obviously ongoing issues in terms of provision for travellers, and that's something that, as I say, falls under Councillor Prenter's portfolio. But target hardening and ensuring that people aren't able to access is obviously key to protecting public spaces, and I think that's the way that I'd certainly view it, that we are protecting these public spaces on behalf of the vast majority of law-abiding Medway citizens, and that's a responsibility that I think is something that I don't take lightly, and that we'll continue to monitor that.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to start off by saying that in my ward, I have noticed some of the improvements we're making with fixing road surfaces. So I know there have been some of key roads in my ward have been repaired, and it's good to see innovation in that field as well, taking learning from other councils. I think that's really encouraging. That's really excellent. I wanted to ask about, and I had another comment, but this might not be your portfolio. I think it might be Councillor Curry's, about EV charging points. I think that sits with him, doesn't it? My experience is that it's really difficult in Medway to find functional charging units. I think last week my battery was running low and I drove to 3 different spots to charge. None of them worked. And so, yeah, anyway, I think we have quite a way to go before we get to that stage that people can rely on it.
So on the road surface question, absolutely, and there's a lot of innovation out there. I did produce a video in conjunction with our comms team around one of the techniques that we were exploring in the autumn with the thermal repair vehicle, which essentially is a unit which uses a high heat treatment on a sort of 2 metre by 1 metre area of road surface, heats it up to high temperature in, about, I think, 9 minutes, something like that, at which point a very limited amount of new material can then be sort of added into the broken up surface, at which point it is then sort of rollered flat. And so the environmental benefit of that in not having to use huge amounts of asphalt to do the road repairs is fantastic. And so we were able to borrow a unit from a council in the southwest to explore that. And again, not to interfere too much in the operational decisions made by our highways team, but that's a bit of kit that I can certainly see the value of. I know that our contractors appreciated being able to use that and use that new technology. And the other thing that it was also beneficial for was in reducing the white finger vibration. Is that what it's called? White finger vibration. So where people are using pneumatic drills on a daily basis and picking up industrial injuries over a lifetime. That isn't part of this process. It was literally somebody with a shovel breaking up the surface once it had been heated. So that's something that I think I would certainly like us to. I'd like us to buy everything, all the great kit, but obviously we have to prioritise, and I'll take guidance from officers on that. In terms of EV charging, in terms of particular portfolio responsibilities, certainly where it falls to installation of on-street EV charging points, that is under my portfolio, but obviously again in conjunction with Councillor Curry and serving that climate change agenda. We've got a programme of work which is ongoing at the moment. There's a contract which has gone out to tender, I think. Is that right, Ruth?
Yes, that's right, and we're waiting to hear. We think probably about April next year. But we do have some funding for EV charging points.
And just the sort of nature of those on-street charging points, what I was reassured by, because you're going to create another bun fight if people are jockeying for position outside their house for on-street parking adjacent to a charging point. And my understanding is that certainly the initial contract is looking at charging points at the end of sort of terraces or on gables, so they're not actually outside people's properties directly, which I think is helpful. But it's a challenge being faced everywhere. We have in the Medway towns, a lot of our roads were designed for horses and carts rather than Teslas, and so you know we are working against not nature, but certainly the infrastructure that we have is largely Victorian in many parts, and so it's a challenge, but it's something that we are making strides on, and I'm keen that we keep up with other local authorities on that.
Thank you for that. I understand the limitations with that. It's tricky, but we do kind of have to find a way to move forward. I wanted to ask about fly tipping, littering, and enforcement around that. So I would say by far the majority of inquiries I get from my constituents is somewhere around street cleaning, littering, fly tipping, and things like that. So there's still a lot of that around. And I know the street behind my house, for example, it's constantly littered and there's fly tipping. And you clear it and then it comes back again. Do you think enforcement is enough? Do you think we are doing enough to pick up these perpetrators and enforce it? Also, I know we had a wall of shame sort of initiative. Has that helped at all?
So yeah, so the wall of shame is live, and again, you can imagine there are limitations in terms of you know the sort of hoops you must go through in GDPR and all that sort of thing. So I don't have any information for you in terms of people that we have identified. We certainly would encourage members of the public to have a look at the wall of shame, and if they can identify the individuals involved, that's really helpful. But it's clear that even people being caught in the act, as it were, on camera, that's not a panacea. So you can imagine the difficulty of catching them in person. That almost never happens. I think it's fair to say. So the investigation relies on finding information in the material that has been fly tipped. But I think. I take your point. I think the enforcement on these things, because it is so difficult, there's no easy fix. In so much as red routes, for example, present an easy fix for dealing with people who inconsiderately block major routes in Medway. They tend to be in vehicles which have a registration plate, which creates that chain of enforcement where they can then be issued with a PCN. It's never going to be that straightforward, although obviously where we have temporary cameras that can perhaps pick up on hotspots, and that's something I would again encourage members to do. If there is a particular area, we do have mobile cameras which, you know, subject to availability, can be deployed and can make a difference. Other measures, such as designing out the problems, alligating, that sort of thing, can obviously stop some of that sort of everyday fly tipping which might take place in certain parts of the borough. But yeah, it's an ongoing issue. Just to refer back to the Medway 2.0 project again, it's my ambition for that people are presented with something that has been sort of referred to as a warden in their pocket, where they are able to, in a sort of very straightforward fashion, report all manner of incidents. So at the moment we've got a process which has come on stream for reporting abandoned vehicles or suspected abandoned vehicles, which is a much more user-friendly process and taking people through the process rather than saying when they get to a particular question, computer says no, and you'll have to go and take that up with DVLA. This new process actually guides people all the way through to a much more satisfactory outcome. That process has been developed as the sort of the first pilot of many. There's more processes coming on stream shortly, so I hope that residents will have at their disposal the opportunity to not only report things but see the action which follows on from that report. Certainly, I know that our street scene team do a great job of clearing up fly tipping when it is reported, but I don't want them to have that endless task. You know, obviously we want culprits to be caught, and we want people to take pride in where they live. Most of us do. Most of us, you know, the vast majority of people don't drop litter. The vast majority of people put their bins out on the right day and don't fly tip. And there's an element of peer pressure that, you know, I know Councillor Campbell raised this at the committee in terms of the Public Spaces Protection Order for dogs. And I do think that has a massive role to play. You know, that if an area feels cared for, and if people are proactive in reporting things, and if fly tips are cleared up almost before people have noticed them, that has the potential to help in changing that behaviour longer term. So I think there's reason to be hopeful, but I recognise it's a difficult problem, and it's frustrating when it doesn't feel like people are being punished. But I would just finally mention the number of enforcement PCNs that have been issued by district enforcement and by our own officers in terms of littering in the street, and to send that very clear message to those who think that the payment of the PCN is optional. Well, the Magistrates' Court role speaks differently, because there is, you know, in the last few months, sadly, dozens of people who have attempted to avoid paying that penalty, and they've been taken to court, and they've paid a hell of a lot more when they've been taken to court. And we will do that. We will prosecute, because ultimately I consider that to be an offence against all of us. You know, everyone in this room and the vast majority of our constituents want to live in a place that is cared for and looks cared for, and I certainly am not prepared to accept a small minority spoiling it for everyone else.
Okay, thank you very much. Time for the last question, Councillor Peake.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Brake's question that he said some time ago now actually reminded me of a question I've been meaning to ask myself. As a former owner of a small business, where I would not want to pay for my employee to be stuck in traffic making a delivery. After all, we all know that old adage that time is money. You know, want your employee to be able to get from A to B as quick as possible. So not only the improvement in timetable for buses, but also for all businesses, but particularly for small businesses, because the margins are much smaller. So I'm curious to know if there's a way, I don't know, of measuring how much more effective the red lines have been in helping with that flow of the traffic, because it affects them. But it's not just about speed either. I think it's a pretty well established fact that one of the major causes of traffic accidents, whether it's on a motorway where people try to overtake a moving car, but also in small roads where you are blinded and you cannot see when people try to go around a station road. It is a major cause of traffic accidents. So there's that element as well. And I'm saying this in the spirit of, I assume that all councillors here are supportive of a fast-flowing traffic for all those reasons, because after all, in the previous administration, we had double yellow lines. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think all red lines have only been on top of yellow lines. I don't think there's any new roads. So there's always been this desire, because yellow lines meant to the public, you cannot stop there. Your selfish and inconsiderate behaviour of stopping just because you want to better jump out of your car for a couple of minutes, which then becomes 10 minutes and then blocks it for everybody else, is actually not acceptable. Because what about everybody else? So I presume that everybody here actually supports the idea of fast-flowing traffic. So it'd be interesting to get these stats and see how well it's working. Thank you.
I'll just slightly take issue with Councillor Peake's reference to fast-flowing traffic. I would want traffic that is travelling at an appropriate speed, and particularly,
appropriate speed. Thank you. Yeah.
You know, and on that point, you know, it's certainly something that I think a natural follow-on from the work that we're doing on school streets is to look at the speeds that are being that cars are travelling at on those roads and adjacent streets. I think that would be entirely appropriate. But in terms of what Councillor Peake says about traffic flows, I think the businesses along the red route have actually benefited from additional places to legally stop and load outside their businesses. That was actually a very positive outcome from the informal consultation on the red routes process. And I would urge people to participate constructively when there are these informal consultations, which are essentially co-design stages of plans like the red routes or the school streets. I would say that the communities which have positively engaged with these processes have ended up with tangible benefits. I think that's certainly been the case in Rainham, where there were loading bays identified and places which people can stop without bringing the whole of Medway to a halt. So yeah, absolutely, it's something that we all have an interest in. Look, you know, people present whether it's red routes or school streets or yellow box enforcement. They seem to come into two camps. It's either there is no problem, why are you wasting money enforcing this? Or this is just a money-making exercise. And I would imagine that the truth is probably lies somewhere else entirely, and certainly between the two. If people continue to act in that selfish manner, whether it's putting children in danger on school streets or putting the rest of Medway at inconvenience by blocking major routes, then they have to expect that there will be a penalty, and I make no apology for challenging that behaviour using the enforcement processes that we have. It's only a money maker if people continue to misbehave.
Exactly.
These charges are entirely optional, and I've made that really clear right from the start. You stick to the rules, you don't pay a penny.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Patterson. We know what's on your Christmas list, so hopefully you'll get that pothole machine under the mistletoe this year. Okay, thank you for your attendance. You're all three to go, and also I suggest a 5-minute comfort break for the committee. Oh, sorry, hang on. Apologies, I'm going to throw to my vice chair for a proposal.
So I've got a few recommendations. The committee's asked to note the report, and I've listed 3 recommendations. List of patrolled school crossings across Medway, please. Red route data to be provided regarding cost and impact, and a further discussion with colleagues across this and the health portfolios regarding the prevalence of ASC traits seen in the prevent space. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Thank you. Is that agreed? Agreed. Let's adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes. Thank you. item will be the Council Plan Performance Monitoring Report and Strategic Risk Summary, Quarters 1 and 2, 2024-25. This item will be presented by Ruth Delou.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This report summarises the performance of the One Medway Council Plan 2024 to 2028, performance indicators that fall under the remit of this committee for Quarter 1 and Quarter 2, 2024 to 2025, April to September 2024. There are 56 performance indicators for the One Medway Council Plan 24-28, which fall under the remit of this committee. This report also presents the Quarter 1 and Quarter 2 24-25 review of strategic risks at Appendix 2. There are no changes to strategic risk scores for this quarter. One new strategic risk has been added to the strategic risk summary this review. It's SR35, homelessness. This reflects the increasingly unstable environment around homelessness. Cabinet received this report on the 19th of November 2024. Open to any questions, members.
Thank you. Any member? Any member? Okay, can we go to, if that's the case, last chance, we will go to the Vice Chair for a recommendation. Oh, hang on. Would you like to speak? Yes. Okay, Councillor Cook.
But it's such a tiny operational that I've just written down here, Ruth, and that is where it's either not available or annual. I would find it really helpful to be able to probe on what have we not got the data on versus what do we not know because we only report on it in a year. Because that was the bit for me. It's so helpful to see. It's so clear. But what do I not know? What am I not being told? Thank you. That was it.
Happy to take that forward.
Okay. Thank you. We'll go to the Vice Chair for a recommendation.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I haven't even had time to find the right page. Members are asked to consider the Q1 and Q2 2024-25 progress of the performance indicators used to monitor progress of the Council's priorities as set out in Appendix 1 to the report. And members are asked to note the strategic risk summary as set out in Appendix 2 to the report.
Is that seconded? Thank you. And is that agreed? Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we're going to take, item 8, which is the capital budget monitoring for round 2, and the revenue budget monitoring for, do you want to present them together? Yeah. Revenue budget monitoring for round 2, 24-25. Dave Reynolds is going to introduce these together.
I'll do a really quick introduction for the interest of speed. Members had a bit of a briefing before this session started officially, but just to say that these reports were presented to Cabinet on 19th of November and summarise the budget monitoring positions that have been considered by Directorate Management teams based on returns submitted by budget managers for the second round of monitoring for 24-25. For capital, there's a reported overspend of 6.2 million within the remit of this committee. Para 5.1 on page 193 does have an error as it says it's an overspend. It is in fact an underspend, so apologies for that. And then for the revenue report, the overall reported overspend across the council is £11.2 million, which is an improvement of just over 5 million from the position reported at round 1. And within that overall overspend, the areas in the remit of this committee are an overspend of around £2 million. Happy to take questions if there are any.
Thank you. Councillor Lamas. Councillor Lamas, sorry, I was indicating. I was wondering whether I saw a hand from Councillor Brake.
Just a quickie. I know this has been answered previously, but I'm subbing, so I'm going to take advantage. Can you please explain to me why we had an underspend on the highways budget, especially in a run-up to a general election year? And can you please explain to me the massive remaining budget underspend on green spaces? Does that include more trees and more flowers and things like that we're not getting, which we could get even with our current budget allocation, or am I mistaken? Thank you.
Are they on the revenue report? Yeah. So item 9. Item 8.
Just to help, Councillor Lamas, have you got a specific page number you're referring to?
it's the top line figures, 193. Why have we got underspends? Why did we basically have a 13 million underspend when our roads were a terrible state in the general election year? Why? And the second question was, is the 3.5 million we underspent on green spaces, does that mean that there are less flowers and less trees, which I'm obsessed with, not being planted, that we've already allocated money to be planted, or does that not come under that budget? That's just 2 questions.
I'm sorry if I'm being a bit dumb here, but I can't see the exact references on the pages. So we're in the capital report, yeah?
Page 193 of the bundle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Remaining budget for frontline services highways. We had an expenditure of 86.3 million. We had 99.9 million budget. We had an unspend of 13.6 million. At a year end when we knew we was having a general election, which I think is a bit cheeky. I just wondered if that was strategic or naughty or an oversight or deliberate. That's what I want to know. And then the underspend on green spaces. I mean, I love Ruth. She sorted me out great with everything I've asked for, but the rest of Medway should be beautiful too.
Yes, so these are capital budgets, so the agreed budgets aren't for annual budgets. They are for the delivery of the programme of the scheme. And so, although that was an overall budget for kind of highways of £99.8 million, up to the end of the financial year of 23-24, £86.3 million was spent. That left £13.6 million to be spent on those agreed programmes in the current financial year. And we are currently projected to spend all of that money either in this year or in future years.
I understand that, but the allocation for the financial year ending March 2024 was 99 million. Your answer is telling me you kept some money back to spend after the Tories got chucked out. I'm asking, why was that done? And was that deliberate?
Councillor Lammas, as an officer, I'm not. It's on the accuracy of the report. I'm not sure that we can necessarily say that the officer is politically motivated.
No, I'm not accusing the officer of that.
Yeah, Phil.
Okay, so it's to do with the presentation. So that wasn't necessary. So that total budget, 99 million, isn't necessarily the budget that was allocated prior to March 24. So that total budget also includes the allocation that was made for this financial year, plus previous year's allocations. Now, against that total, we've got 13 million to spend in year. So some of that will be new money, some of it will have been rolled forward from previous years. Now, actually, that analysis doesn't make clear how much was rolled forward because it's a highly summarised report. So we'd have to go back and find out what the carry forward, how much of that 13.7 million that you refer to, how much of that was rolled forward from the previous year and how much of it was new allocations and new grant. I haven't got that to hand, so we'll have to come back to you with that one. But the point is, it is all forecast to be spent over the current year and next year. If that presentation's not clear, then I apologise, but that's what it's telling us.
Thanks, and we can clarify that in the recommendations. Councillor Filmer? Oh, sorry, Sonny.
Thank you. I mean, just to say, for the green spaces, so because it's the capital, it's like the Section 106 and the green spaces development, which actually sits in my team. So again, similar to what Phil's saying, then we could provide a financial breakdown. But for example, Temple Marsh is in here that was identified as a project that could be delivered over 2 to 3 years. That budget is set up early, and then obviously anything we don't spend is rolled over. So there's not a conscious decision not to spend it. Yeah, it's around a capital project. It's identified, it's put in the capital programme, but it's not necessarily for that whole year in its entirety. So there's no, if you like, specific decision not to spend money this year. It could be things like planning. There's various processes where you only get a small amount of money spent in 1 year. Then the following year, you start to then spend larger chunks of money. So that's it from the green spaces perspective, just to be clear that sits around the green spaces development. And again, obviously, Ruth can comment on the highways element. But hopefully that helps clarify that. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a bit of sense. What you're saying is that some projects can be spent over different periods of time and where it falls in the report. I understand that. But the question I have is if there's you know what I mean? I get that. but like 13.6 million, I don't know, it just seems a bit strange to me, that's all. It seems a bit strange.
Okay, yep, Ruth.
I'd be happy to run through it with you in more detail outside of the meeting if that helps, but what I can assure you on the highway side is if there was money to spend, the money was spent. So I think it is just to do with the presentation, to be honest with you.
Okay. Microphone on through the chair, please.
Yeah. What really concerns me is that over the period there, we are spending less on that. Now, if that was a genuine saving, I'm not talking about how it's split over the various years. I'm talking about the total scheme variance. And there you are, 5 million under, which you might say is commendable. Well, it might be commendable, but what I would like to know is that real saving, or is that actually something that actually hasn't been done, or we've actually made a saving by not doing the job as well as we might? So I think that's really what the sort of information that is difficult to actually calibrate.
Okay. Any other members? Okay. Councillor Peake.
Sorry, I kept on scrolling. I lost the page reference number. There's reference to Brook Theatre, and I'm in danger of asking you to get out your crystal ball. Is there any, it talks about money being awarded and works carrying on in March 2025, which is not that far away now. Is there any reason to have any doubt about that money becoming available and the progress of Brook Theatre and all its work being done? Is it on schedule, please?
Thank you, Councillor. The question mark is around the Levelling Up Fund, round one, which we were successful in, of circa £6 to £7 million. That is to be spent by March this financial year. We have requested that we can take that money over, and we're in discussion with government around allowing us to do that. Discussions at the moment are very positive, and we're just literally over the next few weeks into the new year confirming that with them. All right.
Thank you. Any other member? Okay. We'll go to Councillor Cook for recommendations for both item 8 and 9, please.
Thank you. So just to clarify what I've got here, I've got an additional recommendation that further clarification as to the amount of capital budget rolled over from previous years into the current budget, particularly in the FLS Highways and Regeneration of Green Spaces budget. And then it is recommended that the Regeneration, Culture and Environment Overview and Scrutiny Committee notes the results of the second round of capital budget monitoring for 24-25. That's for item 8. And then for item 9, the committee notes the results of the second round of revenue budget monitoring for 24-25, and the committee notes that Cabinet instructed the corporate management team to implement urgent actions to bring expenditure back within the budget agreed by the full council.
Thank you. Is that proposed? Is that seconded? Yep, thank you. And is that agreed for firstly item 8 and secondly item 9? Thank you very much. Okay, we are on to item 10, which is the draft capital and revenue budget for 2025-26. Members had benefit of a briefing before this meeting on this item, but Phil Rotts will introduce this item for this meeting.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So it's a constitutional requirement that the Cabinet consults with Overview and Scrutiny Committees on its draft budget for 25-26, as agreed at the Cabinet meeting on the 19th of November. Members of this committee are invited to comment on the proposals in the draft budget insofar as they impact upon services within the remit of the committee. The draft budget requirement that we presented today includes significant growth. However, it also assumes that the Council will again request exceptional financial support in 25-26 of circa £26 million, as per the presentation earlier. This report also summarises the announcements from the government's autumn budget. However, since the report was written, the government have published a bit more guidance in the form of its local government finance policy statement. It made clear that government funding will be targeted towards authorities with higher deprivation and lower ability to raise local taxes. And we think that will be positive for us, but we don't know the exact numbers until we see the provisional settlement next week. The provisional settlement will be published next week. When we'll have the final allocations, we'll report that to Cabinet in January and then build that into the final budget when it goes to Cabinet and Council in February. We'll try and answer any questions you might have.
Okay, Councillor Lammas.
Thank you, Chair. How much of the £13.6 million remaining budget from last financial year is rolled over into the projected forecast spend for highways budget for the preceding financial year?
So it's the £5 million figure that we're saying will be spent in next year. But we've just kind of been discussing this. Obviously, this is very summarised analysis. Within that highways budget is the tunnel funding. And that tunnel grant that Ruth and her team managed to get from government, it was always the intention that would be spent over a number of years. So that's a big chunk of that £5 million carry forward into future years. It was never the intention that all of that would be spent in year. That's right, Ruth, isn't it? Yeah.
Could I just a question? Maybe it's something that the committee, this committee wants to put forward. Is given the serious significance of highways on our constituents' concerns, particularly with things like road resurfacing, would it not be more advantageous for the committee to have a default of more granularity when it comes to the data on highways, so that things like multi-year spending, things like huge uplifts for the project you just mentioned, that they're not, infiltrating and polluting figures which we need to monitor super closely to ensure that the potholes are sorted out?
So members will recall that in the past we have provided much more granular data, and we decided to move away from that because I think it was just overwhelming for the committee. But in this instance, I understand what you're saying. It's a significant budget, and it's difficult to see the wood for the trees. Would it work if we were to produce a briefing for this committee on that particular budget line and explain how it's comprised and where the roll forwards come from?
I think that's a very useful suggestion. Councillor Filmer.
It's actually been covered, Chair, on the money we left behind for the maintenance of the tunnel, so won't go there.
Thank you. Any other members want to come in? Councillor Peake.
Now, just following on with this line of thinking, I read this report as being deliberately a generic look at figures. However, Chair, I do think it's legitimate that if we narrow down, not too many subjects, because that will be overwhelming, but if you've got a specific area, and it would be interesting to know the pothole budget, if you like, because it's so much more expensive than people realise. So surely that's a role of this committee to, if you ask for something very specific that we can look at, that would be a way forward, possibly.
Thank you. Councillor Doe, please.
Yeah, can I just ask, I know this is very early day figures, I understand that, but before we actually get too much further into the budget process next year, what assumptions will we make about our outside providers of care? Because I do know that the market is now under tremendous pressure. People, in fact, are pulling out because they're making losses and so on. And I just wondered, how far you can check that before, you present, if you like. What would be worst thing is obviously to present the budget and then find that actually the costs that you hope to spend have gone up by, say, 10% or 5%. And that could, really mess your budget up.
Sorry, just on that, I think is that the business of another scrutiny for care? But I mean, if officers win to answer that, that's fine.
That was the first point I was going to make. That your question isn't obviously part of the remit of this committee, but I mean, what I will say, the scenario that you've outlined on the back of the Chancellor's budget, where announcements were made around national living wage and changes to national insurance, there will be an impact on our providers. We're trying to assess what that will look like so that we can reflect that into the final budget build in due course.
I wasn't asking actually for the figures, to be quite clear. That wouldn't be part of this committee's remit. What I'm saying is when we come to review it at a later stage, the sort of questions I would be wanting answers to are, how far do these figures stand up in terms of approaches to the people that we need to use in order to get a decent standard of adult care? And I think that's the real point, because if they're all coming out of the market and we just make the various assumptions, then I think we could be in some difficulty, real difficulty. And I'm not being negative or political about this. I'm just saying it's something we face as a council, full stop.
No, the general point to make is that we make assumptions at a point in time. We made a set of assumptions in September, end of August, when we drafted the medium-term financial outlook. We've then refined those assumptions when we took the draft budget in November. There will be changes that come out from the provisional settlement and as we go through our own monitoring process that will change those assumptions again, and we'll try and reflect those in the final budget in February.
And again, members indicate, but I did have a question on 191 proposal, and hopefully it will be the explanation give. I see that there's implementation of a lane rental scheme, which sounds good. We're hearing about congestion. I see it's a budget pressure. Is that to do with the fact that there's a setup of the scheme and in future years that will then become an income stream?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And at the moment, we're waiting on government to give us, Secretary of State, to give us approval to actually implement it. So that's why it's showing in the way that it is.
Thank you. Okay. Any other members want to come in here? Okay. I will pass to the Vice Chair to make a proposal, please.
Thank you. The committee is asked to note that Cabinet has instructed officers to continue to work with portfolio holders in formulating robust proposals to reduce the budget deficit for 25-26 and to continue to liaise with the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government to secure support through the Exceptional Financial Support Scheme. The committee is also asked to comment on the proposals outlined in the draft capital and revenue budgets 2025-26 insofar as they relate to the services within the remit of this committee, and feed this back to Business Support and Digital Overview and Scrutiny Committee in January. And I've noted the further recommendation request of a breakdown of the highways budget, and it's been offered in the form of an additional briefing. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Thank you. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. So now we are on to the petitions report. So this report is for noting only, so it doesn't require an officer introduction, but does any member want to raise any issues in the report as written? So that's all the way, so that's on page 261 in your links. Anyone? Okay, I'm going to pass to the Vice Chair for a proposal then.
The committee is requested to note the petition responses and appropriate officer actions in paragraph 4.1 of the report.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we're on to the final stretch now. So we're on to the work programme, and Vanessa, who's been diligently taking notes all evening, will be introducing this report.
The work programme is set out in Appendix A to the report, and any changes made are set out in section 4.2 of that report.
Excellent. Anyone want to speak on that? Anyone there? Should also just note that briefing notes, link to the briefing notes was sent out to members yesterday, so if you ever want to consult that, that is available for members to review. So I'm going to pass it to the Vice Chairperson for a proposal.
Thank you. The committee is asked to note the report and agree the work programme as set out at Appendix A to the report, and the committee is asked to note the action log as set out at Appendix B to the report. Thank you.
Is that seconded? Thank you. Is that agreed? Agreed? Well, I shall see you same time, same place next week. Thank you all, committee.